Hi, my name is Adeline Cowgill, and I'm a Girl Scout in the Los Angeles area. And today I'm going to be interviewing Carrie Strohl about her experience as a woman in STEM. Carrie, to start off, do you mind briefly explaining what your job entails, where you went to college, what you studied, and what influenced this decision?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying I'm what I consider one of the best kinds of scientists. I study social science. So I study how people learn, how they interact in social systems, how organizations work. And specifically, my focus is on how all people learn science. And so for a long time, I taught at a science-focused school. I taught third and fourth grade as a public school teacher in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then eventually I pursued a master's degree in an area that is largely underserved, which is reading and learning disabilities. I did that in Milwaukee as well at a small private college. When I moved to Napa, I got a job at the Lawrence Hall of Science. It was a strange time of years to, or of the sort of time period we were in. It was 2008. I was in between classroom teaching and teaching teachers, and I happened to find this position at the Lawrence Hall of Science, which is a public science center on the UC Berkeley campus. And what I did there for a number of years was co-develop and design science curriculum that integrated literacy and science for elementary school classrooms, and then traveled all over the country training teachers how to use that curriculum. While in that career path, I decided to pursue a PhD in science education. And that is where I would say in, previewing your questions coming up, would say the greatest challenges came up, right? Higher education can be a really unfriendly place, especially if you didn't grow up kind of in the know, if you don't have an academic in your family, if you weren't really socialized in settings that really kind of teach you how to navigate that social setting. So I encountered a lot of challenges. Sort of one of the big ones is imposter syndrome, not feeling like you really belong there, things like that. And so that's what led me to do what I do now. And so currently I am the founder and leader of the School Garden Doctor. And I see you have a question about that, so I'll pause there.
Okay. So yeah, if you want to just, expand on like what you do working with like the school garden doctor, like what's your favorite part about it? And I saw like you're a part of like the Dirt Girls program, if you want to expand.
Yeah. I'm super excited about that. So, as I said, as the founder and leader of the School Garden Doctor, it's a very, very, very small and very young nonprofit organization. And I handle basically all of the business, right? Like all of the finance, the sort of goal setting, reporting, the compliance. But I do that with the support of a board of directors, just like Girl Scouts has a board of directors and National Girls Collaborative, where How We Connected has a board of directors. They support that as well. It's different from an LLC in that it's a small business, but it's a small business by built and founded with a community mindset. So I also do the development of the programs, and one of my favorite programs is Dirt Girls. The mission of the organization is to nurture a collective approach to creating and sustaining programs that are rooted in equity and grounded in nature. And so I would say those are STEM adjacent in the way that outdoor exploration is one of the gateways to STEM education, right? Learning to be comfortable in the outdoors, nurturing curiosity, exploring your identity with science. Those are really parts of what makes that happen. And so my current role is that I do a lot of work with other nonprofit organizations to increase the way they are becoming more equitable, especially in outdoor and environmental ed. And Dirt Girls was founded in 2016. It started just as an after school club when I was working at an elementary school in a lead teacher position. And I saw that there was such a need for a safe space for kids to really play outdoors, but more than that, really dig into the science. It wasn't heavily guided. It was a lot of it was open to choice, but we did have this shared goal of curating and sort of becoming the caretakers of the school garden. So it's an after school garden-based STEM education program that provides opportunities for participants to explore their science identities. And I really saw a need to supplement what kids were getting in terms of their school exposure and exposure to outdoor science, and especially to empower young girls to find their voices, especially their inner voices, right? I went to a private all-girls high school, and so I had some sense that that there was some value in creating a gender safe space in that way. But it's been really just a love. And the pandemic slowed it down a little bit, but we're back up right now.
Yeah. Like, like your identity as a woman, like, has that like influenced like you working with like the Dirt Girls program? Like, is there anything that like, your experience going through like higher education and that, like, have you like
Hmm.
projected that on these younger girls?
Absolutely. That's such an important question. I would say one of the ways is in an approach, which is kind of what makes it a little bit grassrootsy in that it's meeting the moment where we're at. There are lots of wonderful organizations out there. One that comes to mind is Girls on the Run. They really focus on empowerment, but it is a curriculum. And so it's teaching in a focused way, kind of this lesson, this lesson, this lesson. Whereas my approach is really being in the present moment, building on relationship with each other, becoming a trusted adult in their life, creating safe space for apprenticeship. So it's multi-age, and kids often work older kids with younger kids so that we avoid things like BFFs and cliques and like only certain kids working together. That's part of creating a truly inclusive space. A couple of years ago, I was running the program in a community-based way and it was open to all gender. But when I invited kids that I knew in the community who identified as male, they would like crinkle their noses. It's like that is a terrible stigma to have that attached just because the name is Dirt Girls. But we're moving in the right direction, right? Last year we had 4 boys join the program. And, we need, if we look societally at who holds the most power, globally, especially, we actually need to become allies, right? We need to find our allies of especially high-powered males to be able to understand that this issue is based in societal perception, based in gender-based norms, things like that. Are you good enough? Are you strong enough? We're moving away from the cultural expectation that women work mostly in the home. That's a totally valid option, but it's not the only option.
Yeah. Yeah. I think your program's like really good at, like showing girls that there's so much they can do. Like in like I know this is like technically like a mentorship program, like an outreach program. Like
Hmm.
how would you say like have you seen any like specific impact like on these girls or like any specific stories that you want to share like where you really like saw like girls find their voices?
Yeah, all the time. One that comes to mind is from a while back, but the program does have a structure. It's not just totally free form. And part of the structure is an opening circle, which is a community building, and then teamwork challenge. So usually some kind of chore related to the garden. And then there's a choice activity. And I have had kids want to do things like ask, and they have to ask permission because they're not allowed to do it anywhere else. They ask things like, can we take off our shoes and run in the grass barefoot? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like so simple, right? It feels so simple, but it's that type of expression that is often not allowed. I've had kids want to stand in the dirt in their bare feet. I've had kids, and what else I like is that kids that I've interacted with through Dirt Girls, I see out in the community. I live in Northern California in a community that's not that big, and I see kids out in the community and they're involved in many other things. I've had kids in Dirt Girls who have written letters to the editor. And I'm not drawing a causal connection in any way, right? As a social scientist, I know the difference between causation and correlation. And what is important, though, is that learning takes place in many forms and many locations across lifespan. And so we need kids to be involved in STEM opportunities, not just in school, or
Yeah.
not just in the home or not just in extracurriculars, but in all of those places. And so that's what I see as the most kind of promising outlook.
Yeah. So then I kind of like to build off of that. Like what skills or experiences like do you believe are most important for young women to develop if like they're interested in STEM?
Yeah. Well, one is persistence
Yeah.
because there are enough challenges out there. Self-confidence, so that's where that voice comes
Yeah.
from, like trusting your inner feeling, your intuition, um, but not letting that get into ego, right? We've had a kind of a wave of feminism that was based on like women can do anything men can do. But actually, there are some things we don't want to do that way, right? Like not because of gender, but just because of our inner like makeup and how we are. I'm sort of an introverted person. I don't want to be the big bullhorn or whatever. Vulnerability in that way, being willing to understand like how to share that softer side. And then resilience for sure. These are a lot of the soft skills, not the hard skills. Obviously, some, educational pursuits, some, volunteer opportunities, internships, all those kinds of stepping stones that lead the way, build some of your credibility in the fields, so to speak. I would say exploring broadly at all the different things that interest, and then kind of picking one and sticking with it. Like I'm super impressed that you're able to articulate exactly what you're thinking of doing right at this moment because you'll stay a little more like focused on it,
Yeah.
right? And the educational landscape is that they look for that kind of drive. And so kind of knowing what's expected in that landscape of the educational system is going to help you pursue that goal.
Yeah. When you were younger, this is just like a question, like, did you have an idea of like what you wanted to pursue? Like, did you always loved like the environment, or was there like a specific factor that kind of, you know, like helped influence this decision?
Yeah, that's such a like important question. I'd have to say I succumbed to the socialization, the pressure of socialization. I was the oldest in my family. I had a lot of caregiving responsibility as a young person. And so, you go to high school, you have this guidance counselor who makes you take some kind of personality test or some kind of thing that helps you. And it said, oh, you'd be good in the caregiving profession. But if I had known, so I became a teacher.
Yeah.
If I had known that working with plants was a career, I mean, you can see, look at my like
Yeah.
room, right? Like
Yeah.
I love plants. I love them. I don't just love them like they're fun to decorate with or they're cool to observe. I love the relationship we can develop with
Yeah.
plants, right? Plants have been here longer than any other like life form. I think it's well, in terms of evolution before animals at least, right? And I think that's really exciting. And when I've built a lot of the circles around plant interactions in botany, looking at botany. Botany was one of the first sciences available to women.
Yeah.
And we tend to still gravitate toward the life sciences, but I would say no, I had no idea. I probably could have been a scientist, like a hard scientist, but I appreciate how I was able to bring it full circle and do what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite type of plant?
Well, I love that Monstera. It's about 3 years old, I think. But really, I love native plants. And my favorite native plant is I have two right now. One is it's a plant called Clarkia,
Mhm.
and it's this delicate, small pink flower. It's kind of ephemeral. It's usually referred to commonly as farewell to spring. So it's like a signal between transitional seasons. And then I also love the sticky monkey flower, which is just this super cool. It has different colors depending on where you find it in California, but it is a California native plant and it's spectacular.
Oh, interesting. Okay, now like
Yeah.
just looking back towards this is kind of like how do you think like societal perceptions of like women in STEM can be changed in order to create like a more inclusive environment where women feel like empowered rather than feeling like how you mentioned like imposter syndrome, like to make so like that they feel like they belong.
Yeah. I think we need a lot of role models, right? We're in an exciting time where young people can see a woman possibly being elected to the highest
Yeah,
position of leadership. And not just a woman of color, no less, like just really unique and exciting. I have so much hope for that.
yeah,
I think also then letting gender norms fall away, right? They have to fall away. We have to see humanity as as all one thing, right?
yeah,
These are social structures we've created, not because of inherent differences. And so I think having that opportunity to have those role models, I follow the biographies and memoirs of many women scientists. A couple come to mind, Suzanne Simard, who early on was trying to convince scientists that she had discovered that mother trees communicate through their fungal networks, their mycelial network under the soil, and was just silenced, right? Like met with so much opposition. Robin Wall Kimmerer, an indigenous scientist who used her understanding of experimental design and science to empower the indigenous community to make choices about how to harvest the material they use for braiding sweetgrass. That's the title of her memoir. These are the stories that need to come out to help us understand the paths that people have taken to reach the kind of science. And we need that kind of science. We need those perceptions to shape science for the better.
yeah. Like just how do you think like communities and like even like specific families, how can they support these young women that are interested in like any field of, science or math, technology, engineering, like anything? Like how do you believe that like families can best like nurture these kids in order to, pursue the field?
Yeah. First and foremost, go outside.
Yeah.
Like go outside, explore the wide world, whether it's, camping in the redwoods, tide pooling if that's available to you, even visiting farms or, places. We're so disconnected from the natural world, and to really build that curiosity and wonder and awe. If you don't have that curiosity, you're not going to consider any field of science, because it all starts with that very human interaction. And then I would say at the community level, organizations that seek to close the opportunity gap, right? In public school, we talk about the achievement gap, this like differential between how students of different subgroups, especially racial and language subgroups, special education, how they're achieving. But really, there's an opportunity gap where some kids, wealth is guiding what opportunities some kids are getting and some kids are not. And so, kind of upending the way that we treat out of school time. I'd love to see more Boys and Girls Club have more STEM focused opportunity, and other after school, whatever after school opportunities exist for kids, having those be available. I know you had a question about like kind of who's doing this good work, and all throughout California, there's tons of organizations, Girl Scouts being one of them, but Girls Garage in Berkeley, they have women building things with tools. It's very cool. It's based in design. What if girls design the world that they wanted to see? Girls coding, Black girls in media, girl power, girls in science. She's the first female quotient. If we're on our social media or our devices, like following these organizations that are going to give us the kind of feel good and formulas that we need to develop these opportunities. But for sure, just spend time together outside developing curiosity.
Yeah. And I mentioned like, like wealth and like how that's like a big
Hmm.
factor in like having access. Like I'm not sure like have you had any experience like working with like underserved communities and like, have you like tackled this challenge and like making sure like people are educated despite their like socioeconomic status?
Yeah. One of the ways is reframing what we mean by education, right? I do a lot of work in dual language settings, so schools that are teaching in Spanish as the primary language. And one of the projects I'm working on right now, for example, is on advocacy around monarch education. The scientists and monarch conservation tends to be a very white centric, white female centric movement.
Yeah.
So when we consider that all of the monarch butterflies east of the Rocky Mountains migrate from Canada to Mexico, there's a part of the story that we're not telling, right? And yesterday, I know I mentioned I was at a community event. The community event, our booth, I did it with two other women that I do a lot of work with. One is a garden educator, and they're both educators in environmental education. One is at a school, and one is with a community-based organization. I called them my butterfly besties yesterday. We had a booth, and one of the things we asked people was about the actions they can take, and handed out farmers market purchased avocados that we bought, from our farmers market, and handed out. And people are like, what do avocados have to do with monarch butterflies? Well, one of the greatest threats to habitat loss and destruction is deforestation. And that deforestation is happening in large part for avocado plantations that are, in many instances, run by cartels. So this is something that happens culturally. And when we have in California one of the largest Spanish speaking populations in the country, in where I live, specifically a number of immigrant families from Michoacan, which is the one of the primary locations for the overwintering of the monarch butterfly. We need to create cultural connections that people feel connected to their home culture, to their home language in this thing we call science, right? Before scientists discovered almost 50 years ago where the monarch butterflies were going, the indigenous population in Michoacan knew that the butterflies were there, right? There's a strong cultural significance. I've read that the monarch butterfly return in late October, early November coincides with the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos holiday. And so there's a cultural belief that the souls of the departed are coming home with the monarch.
Oh wow, that's beautiful.
Isn't that a reason to save this organism? Like, not just because science says so. And so I think it's finding that sweet spot where we can build those stories and tell them in a way that brings us all into the fold and into the same goal that we have.
Yeah, no, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. Like, is there,
Yeah, thanks for letting me share that.
yeah, it's like I know like that's like really interesting. Is that like one of your favorite parts like to study and like do research on like monarch butterflies or like do you have like a specific like aspect of science that like really interests you and like something you could spend like hours and hours talking about?
Yes, anything related to complex ecosystems, right? And then finding that angle that's ever so slightly different. Monarchs was not kind of my cause celeb until I had a donor say, like, I'm really interested in participating or supporting monarch education. And I said, well, I'm a very small organization. I can't provide like classroom instruction. I'm just one person. There's, this many classrooms, but I know how to partner well. And so by partnering with the Napa County RCD, the Resource Conservation District, they were doing monarch presentations, but they weren't doing any way station or plantings. Partnering with a school garden, we could bring this together. And I always like to say three is the magic number, right? The trifecta. So by the three of us working together, we're able to elevate the amount of impact that we have by bringing this particular issue to light. And then because of the relationship we've developed with each other, we're really motivated, highly motivated to keep doing the work. And so now we've each been competing for funding to get Monarch Way stations in the schools that want them, but targeting specifically the schools that predominantly enroll Spanish speaking students first,
Yeah.
right? Just kind of having a priority, working it through. But yes, any kind of topic like that where it's a complex kind of, it's not just a simple answer because the social science, right? I love learning the science and I love teaching the science, but the doing of the social interpretation of like, how do we make this stick and resonate? That's what I love about like nonprofit work. It's a different kind of storytelling than a funding proposal to NSF or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, shifting back, like, do you have any like specific like role models like who influence like your decision or like anyone like doing like current research or current like, any like advocacy about like the environment and like is that anything that inspired you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd have to say I do read a lot of memoir, and so I have a couple of even, other scientists that I have followed. Hope Jaron is one. She wrote a book about climate change most recently, but her first book is called Lab Girl, and it's about her struggles in academia. Sort of how did she find a way to build three labs, and she does complex. She's a geologist, but she does this complex imaging with like magnetic resonance, something super complex. But the other thing about her is that she built this lab with the help of a someone with only a bachelor's degree or whatever, right? Like where science might consider it not elevated enough or not high enough status, but she knew where to find that particular talent and bring that talent with and uplift it. But the other part that is so inspiring about her story is that um, she shares in her memoir that she discovered in her path of becoming an academic and a scientist that she's bipolar. So, thinking about the mental health, hidden especially, right? It's one of the invisible disabilities. Most recently, I read Bird Girl, which is about do you know her, Maya Craig Rose?
I think I've heard of her, yeah.
Phenomenal. You might wonder, like, what possibly could a 20-year-old write about? She's 20 or 22 now. But she is multi-ethnic. She's a Bangladeshi British uh, young woman. Her mom is from Bangladesh and her dad is from London. And her mom also is bipolar. And they're super birders. By the time she was 15, she had been to 7 continents. By
Oh,
the time she was 16, she had seen 5,000 birds,
wow.
half like the total number of species on the planet. I think that's accurate. I mean, I know the number is accurate. I don't know if the total number is accurate. So just these inspiring stories. And then local stories too, right? During the pandemic, I saw a Zoom virtual presentation from someone who calls herself the Beetle Lady. She's based in Silicon Valley area. She's a published entomologist. She's published peer review articles as an entomologist, but really found it difficult to balance becoming a mother with staying in science. So she created this nonprofit. It's called the Beetle Lady, and she does corporate events and community events where she teaches people about insects as the largest biomass that we have on Earth and beetles as the most prevalent form of insect. How cool is that, right?
Yeah.
Like people think of bugs and they're like, "Oh, squish it." Like I don't care.
Yeah.
So I those all of those kinds of people. I wouldn't say I have a lot of well, I'm sure I do. I'm just they're not coming to mind
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we consider ourselves kind of equals in the work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do look to many other people's
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, no, I know like talking about like, like the importance of like having like a community and like women, like is there like can you like speak on like the importance that you feel like to have like a bunch of like women at your side like working together?
Oh gosh. I mean, I don't think I could do the work without it, right?
Yeah.
When the self-doubt creeps in, when you think like, "Oh, what am I doing? Do I know what I'm doing?" You need those besties to be
Yeah.
like, no, of course, right? Like I was on the phone with one of my friends the other night. We were talking on the phone for like 3 hours. I haven't done that since I was in middle school.
Mm.
And I was telling her about this email I got about, someone wants to pull me into this pollinator project. And I couldn't quite locate where my resistance was. And she just called it. She said, well, that's because you go the opposite direction. You're about relationship, right? Like I build the relationship and then build the project.
Yeah.
I don't like go in and say like I have a project and I want you to do the project.
Yeah.
And and I needed that perspective to be able to say, yeah, right? And this is through all walks of life, right? Like where I'm going today, I super appreciate your flexibility today because where I'm about to go this afternoon is like a stop hate event
Oh,
because we need these communities who all are aligned with the same vision, coming back to the mission, as I said,
yeah.
rooted in equity, right? It started Dirt Girl started as a way to maintain the school garden, but it actually built on that in that it provided that safe space for girls.
Yeah.
Grounded in nature is if we relate to each other the way that we relate or once related to the natural world, I think that's a good metaphor for growth, right? And growth and survival. The interdependence and ecology of it is super important. So, yeah, that's a super great question.
Yeah. All right. So we're coming to an end. So I just
Okay.
wanted to like end off by asking, what advice would you give to young girls who are hesitant about like pursuing a career in STEM in order to
Hmm.
empower them to pursue this career?
Just know that you are not alone. You are not alone. And if you somehow on the career path figure out that you don't think you can make it, you are of such high worth, even if you don't
Yeah.
pursue whatever goal someone else might have for you. Really looking inside and following your heart and knowing that it's a good fit is, I think, the most important thing. But also, if you think you have that like ability to go into the field and change it, please go into the field because we need those voices and that representation to change the way science is right now. I don't know if you saw the trend a couple years ago. There was this trend about like stop the dude wall, hashtag dude wall, right? There's science like colleges and buildings all over the country with all these headshots of white males.
Yeah.
Like we need that to change, right? That needs to come down
Huh.
and we need that representation. So pursue it if you can, but also just follow your heart.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that, covers all my questions. Just wanted to thank you so much for talking today.
Thank you, Addie.